Welcome to the Training Ground Guru podcast in association with Genius Sports. In every episode, we bring you insights into the teams behind the teams in professional football. Coming up on today's episode.
Tony ranked extremely high and therefore was immediately on the short list once Carlos left. And we actually we ran one model specifically on the championship, who has created the most uplift given the squad that they had and circumstances around the club, and he was third overall behind Company and Farka.
I'm Simon Austin, and our guest on this month's episode is Andrew Nestor, the new sporting director of West Brom. Andrew joined the Baggies last year following the takeover by American entrepreneur Shilen Patel. Prior to that, he had been the owner, CEO and general manager of the Tampa Bay Rowdies in the US and a director at Italian club Bologna. During our chat, Andrew revealed what had been happening behind the scenes at West Brom during the last year and what fans can expect to see in the future. We hope you enjoy this episode, and if you do, please give us a follow via your preferred podcast provider. Thank you very much for joining us on the podcast today, Andrew.
Thank you for having me.
So just to set the scene to start with, we're here at West Brom's training ground, fresh from the match last night and a disappointing result for the club.
Yeah, never a fun journey home after a finish like that. But, we still have time in the season to continue working toward the playoffs, and we'll keep working at it.
And what's the atmosphere like at the club at the moment, would you say? Because it's been a difficult run with the 3 defeats in a row.
Yeah, I think the atmosphere is still very positive. We knew that this year was a year of transition, but we're always going to have the ambition to be a playoff caliber team, despite having a lot of turnover in the squad and despite having to really make a lot of realignment and adjustments within the club as a whole. Since the takeover in February of 24. So I do think there's good optimism, but of course there are high expectations both internally and externally, and we have to keep striving to do better.
And do you remain positive about the playoffs? I think you're in 8th, 9th place, is it, at the moment?
Yeah, in 8th. Sure. I mean, it's a difficult position that we've found ourselves in. We haven't helped ourselves in certain moments. In other moments, I think some results have not been reflective of the match as a whole, but we are still within distance of the playoffs, and we have to carry on to the next match like we would any other match, with an expectation to go out there and do our best and get 3 points.
And we just saw Tony earlier on. I suppose you've got a manager who has been through a lot of these situations before, has a huge amount of experience.
Yes, he does. He has a lot of experience. We have plenty of experience within the squad. It's a good mix of experience and young, hungry players that we've brought in recently. And I think everyone, not just within the squad and the coaching staff, but throughout the organization, just has to continue on trusting our process, and over time that will work in our favor.
And do you think it's a squad that could be equipped for the Premier League if you were to go up?
We would certainly need to make some additions. As you've seen, the transition from Championship to Premier League these days is immensely difficult. We do have some really strong players at this club right now that can compete at that level. But of course, there'd have to be some investment into the squad to make that kind of jump.
And you came into this role in August. How have you found it so far?
I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed the people that I'm working with and the culture around the club. Despite the fact that the club, a little over a year ago, was in a very precarious financial situation, one thing that's been very evident is that this club is made up of employees, staff members, supporters, all of whom really care very deeply about this club. And so stepping into the role that I'm in, you're surrounded immediately by people who want to work hard. They want to see the club succeed. And instead of really asking for things, they're more so saying, what else can we do? And that's really refreshing. Of course, we've needed to start to realign certain things within the club to help empower everyone and give them the resources that they really need to flourish and for the club to do well. So that's been a major focus of mine. But yeah, it's a challenge. It's a massive challenge. But none of the challenges were unknown to me going in. Everything has pretty much been expected. It doesn't make it easy, but there haven't been any, sort of landmines, if you will.
And this is the first time that I've been to the training ground, and it seems an impressive training ground. What did you make of the club when you first came in, like the infrastructure to start with?
Yeah, the infrastructure is good. And that was one of the things that struck me going back now, about a year and a half ago, when I first came over here with Shilen Patel. And we actually came here to the training ground first and saw this facility, and then went over to the ground and then had meetings there, and then walked across the street over to the academy facilities, which are right by the ground. And I was struck by the fact that everything was in very good condition. And that goes to what I was just saying about the staff, the employees, the people who look after these facilities. They're here day in and day out, and no matter what was going on around them and what they were hearing in the news about financial position of the club, everyone shows up to work every day, and they put a lot of love and care into this place. So yeah, the facilities are good. You can always make improvements, and we'll continue to refresh things and make investment as we can. I feel like players and staff are well looked after, and it's a nice place to spend your day.
And I know when Dan Ashworth was here, I think the club was quite well known for being very innovative in terms of the sports science training and the academy as well. Would you say it's fair to say that had gone into decline a little bit just before you came in?
Yeah, decline might be harsh. I think just stagnation because of an inability to continue to invest. But there is a lot of good brain power here, and in departments like sports science and medical performance, that has continued to improve despite lack of investment into certain, equipment and modalities and those types of things. And that's been led by the individuals who have the knowledge and have been using that knowledge to the best of their ability to continue to allow our players to compete at a high level.
And I think I read when you came in, the squad was the oldest in the championship and the fifth highest wage bill as well. So yes. I would imagine that's something you've been trying to rectify since you've been here.
Yes, there was a lot of kind of holdover from Premier League days, and last year was the final year of parachute payments. So there had to be an adjustment financially within the squad. Yeah, it was based off of minutes played, the oldest squad in the league. And in a competition that is so grueling and physical, that can really take its toll over the months. So two major goals for me. One, a necessity, was to really balance the books, both from a wage perspective, but also from a PSR perspective, to ensure that the club didn't breach because it was on track to do so. And in terms of squad age, it's balancing. We've been investing recently into young players, but young players that are ready to perform at this level. And we've also reinvested into players who were here. We've signed new contracts with the likes of Darnell Furlong and Jason Malumbi. Last season, we retained Kyle Bartley, Mowat. We brought Grant back, who had been on loan. So it's striking a balance between experienced veteran players and really kind of the younger up-and-coming players to create the right balance that the team needs to sustain through an entire season, but then also have players pushing each other. So
is the academy a key part of your strategy? Because again, I think it had a difficult time. I remember a few staff, including the academy manager, went to Aston Villa. The squad have got older, as you say, but that's a key part of your focus.
It is, and it's before I arrived, I believe they got poached a bit, both as you say, with staff and coaches as well as players. But with that said, the academy continues to have a real impact in the first team. So Alex Palmer, who we just sold to Ipswich, was an academy product. Tom Fellows has been an outstanding player and came through the academy. And we have some very promising players on kind of the fringe of the first team who train with the first team, whether it's Bostock or Whitwell, Parker, Mohammed, really promising talents. I've spent a lot of time over the past few months with academy leadership going over how we engage with these young players, what we're presenting to them to show them a pathway through the academy to the first team so that, one, they want to stay here, and two, we help enable them to reach the first team, their ultimate goal. And so we've put a heavy emphasis on re-engaging a number of young players now, 10 plus players that I can think of off the top of my head that we see as top prospects that we've now ensured they will be here at least for the foreseeable future.
And has style of play been a focus for you as well? Because I've read about you wanting a more attacking style of play than the one that you inherited.
Yeah, it all starts around the game model. So step number one was, what is the model we feel can get this club promoted? And there's a number of factors that go into that. One is the competition itself. Two is what's realistic to win within that competition financially. And then also, what is a general philosophy that we want to build around? Once we now have an understanding of that, then you can get very, very granular on your scouting. So we know within the type of system we want to play in each position, tactically and technically what's required of each player. We also know physically what's going to be required of that player within a match, training, and then extrapolate that over the course of a season. And we take all of those factors into our modeling to evaluate potential signings. And it's really the only way I see to consistently plan your squad over a period of time to have sustained success. You're going to certainly eliminate making costly mistakes, and you're going to be able to bring in complementary players that can play within a system that we feel can ultimately get this club promoted.
Could you describe in a bit more detail what that style of play is?
Yeah, you mentioned attacking. So what Carlos Corberan had established here was an extremely well-organized game model, and I didn't want to veer far away from that. What we wanted to do was add a bit more of an attacking style to that organization. And ultimately, pretty much every team is going to say that they want to control the match, they want to be sound defensively, and then be able to hurt the opposition. The question is, how do you hurt the opposition? What does that formation look like? Is it more controlling the ball in their half? Is it more counter-attacking? We've been doing a lot of analysis on our opponents because as fans have probably been frustrated with the low amount of goals scored at home. What we found is that organization, possession-based play that we have has led to teams coming to the Hawthorns and just playing in a low block. And we've struggled a bit to break that, and you see a lot of 0-0 draws. And so we've been analyzing how we can start to adapt that style a bit more and then build a system around that. And the system's a bit fluid, so we've built the squad around kind of two key formations, and that formation kind of changes during a match. Sometimes we'll defend with 4 at the back, we're attacking with 3, and that then leads from a scouting perspective to take a look at the type of fullbacks, for example, or wingbacks that you want to bring in that can slide into the midfield as that kind of new number 6, and then everyone else pushes forward. So there's a fluidity to it, but there's a base philosophy underlying all of those decisions.
And have you had to beef up your scouting network since you've come in? We have a big debate again on the website about data, and a lot of clubs are having less kind of eyes on the games and using more and more data and video. So is that something you're doing, and have you had to build out that department?
Yes. So over the past year, behind the scenes, we've brought in a data team that was not here before, and that is to support our scouting process. We believe in a balanced approach, so data is really our kind of first line of scouting. So taking all these various inputs around game model, style, individual positional attributes that we look for, we take all of that, we then layer in the financial piece. What are priority positions for signings? Are they loans? Are they perms? If they're perms, what is the budget for this, both wage-wise and fee-wise? And then taking input in from coaching staff as well in terms of what they feel needs are to improve. And then from there, using the tools that we've begun implementing, we can basically scour an entire database of players globally off of super granular metrics that we're looking for, and start to identify players that we feel could be the right fit. So it's a super efficient way of doing it. Of course, that means that your modeling has to be well developed, and we feel like it is. This is a database built over several years, taking into account pretty much every scouting tool most clubs use, plus others, and then starting to filter in all of our physical data and medical data, those types of things. And then being able to rank players, essentially to look at them and say, how do these potential signings rank amongst themselves? How do they stack up against what we already have? How do they stack up against others in the league, whether it's an average player, best player? And a lot of that model also tries to take into account variations that help us feel like we're comparing apples to apples. And what I mean by that is a player's performance in one league versus what that player's performance in this league could be. So that really is our first line of scouting. That then goes to our scouting department, who then get to work on video. And that's where, there's more of the softer touch, the more of the art of scouting. I don't want to lose that. It's very important. So our scouts are very adept at watching these players, and it's mainly done via video at first. And then if a player progresses through our process, then we want to get physical eyes on them, start to do background check, character, personality, cultural fit. All of that is extremely important as well.
Is it difficult to plan when you don't know what league you're going to be in next season with any certainty?
Yeah, we're running really kind of three models. One is championship, one is promotion and stay up, the other is promotion and come back down. And you just have to be realistic about any scenario that can play out. And there's not necessarily anything wrong with going up, coming back down, and going back up again stronger with a chance, but of course you'd rather just go up and stay up. But yeah, it's running three scenarios or three models at the same time. And we just have to do it for a club like this.
And I suppose your game model informs your player recruitment, but also your head coach recruitment. So did Tony really fit within the model that you were looking for?
Yes, we had a data-led approach on that as well. So of course we, through our networks, have and know of good head coaches around that could have been available, but we did have our data team look at performances of coaches across every league. And what we did there is a bit different than evaluating a player. It was more so looking at the strength of a squad, both the individual players within the squad, as well as the squad as a whole, and their expected performance, and then look at, did their head coach create an uplift in performance, or was it kind of just steady? Because sometimes it can be hard to tell. If you look at a head coach at, I don't know, some of the big clubs out there, they just have so many good players. You wonder, are the players just really good, and the coach just makes sure that he's managing the guys in the locker room and, you know, it doesn't blow up and they do fine, or are they really actually creating positive uplift? And that can be said for really any coach at any level. And so we did an evaluation of various candidates' performance and how that translated into uplift of the squad that they had. And that way you're really judging a coach fairly and taking into all the different various factors that go into a specific situation. Tony ranked extremely high and therefore was immediately on the short list once Carlos left. And we actually we ran one model specifically on the championship just to look over the past 10 years historically who has created the most uplift given the squad that they had and circumstances around the club. And he was third overall behind Company and Farka. Very data-led, but then of course we have to look at, is this someone who fits the game model, the style, is going to come in and be able to work with the players we have and within the system and culture that we're building or not. So that's also very important.
Everyone is looking for a new edge. To find it, you need fresh perspectives. Our sponsor, Genius Sports, uses advanced AI, unique mesh tracking data, and tactical video to help analysts and coaches see and understand the game from every possible angle. This includes player point of views from the 3D recreation tool that sits within their performance studio and is already being used by top clubs in the Premier League, Ligue 1, Pro League, and more. Genius pairs football's most extensive tracking data set ever with multiple automatically synced video angles for the fastest, smartest insights. Join the world's top clubs and find your new edge today. Learn more at www.geniussports.com/TGG.
I remember when he was at Blackburn, actually, he was outstanding in terms of bringing players through from the academy and developing the players. So yeah, I would imagine that's something really in his favour as well at this club.
Yes, Blackburn, Sunderland, he had a number of young players that he worked with and developed. That's certainly important. In Championship, you need that mix, as I mentioned, of veterans and young players coming through. And I think it's important competitively. It's important for your finances as well. And so that is a major focus. It's tricky. It can be really hard to work young players into a first team. Head coach's job to win the next game, right? So then that's where their mentality needs to be. So there's a challenge to working young players into the first team. He's shown that he's done that in the past, and that is something that's very important for any head coach we have here.
And I always think it must be difficult in your job. You're focused on the long term, but this is an industry where you've got 2 games a week. You've maybe got people shouting at you in the ground. The emotion is so high. Is it hard to keep that long-term vision in that environment?
You just have to do it. It can be difficult at times, but yeah, my job is to be the steady ship that balances short-term and long-term. That's always a challenge, but that's just part of the job, and you just have to do it. And then you need to be able to effectively communicate with the head coach, who needs to be thinking about today's training, next match, and be able to balance that communication, balance that planning. And yeah, that just takes strong communication, cooperation, really level setting expectations. Yeah, and everyone just taking accountability for what they need to do.
And it must have been very tough for you. You'd only been in situ about 4 months, I think, when Carlos Corberán went, which I remember was round about Christmas, Christmas Eve maybe. Yeah. Was that a big shock to you at the time?
I wouldn't say it was a shock. I had spoken to Carlos about it when I first came in. You know, he was perceived, and rightly so, as this really bright, up-and-coming head coach, and there's always going to be interest in someone like that. His name popped up every time there was a coaching change, whether it was teams in Championship or Premier League. So I wouldn't say it was a shock. We knew that there would eventually be real interest in him, and it might be something that he feels is good for him. Valencia makes a lot of sense given that he's from the area. So it's kind of hard to argue with wanting to coach your hometown team. So no, it wasn't a shock, but it's certainly difficult to go through a transition like that in the middle of a season. Especially the timing was difficult. It was on Christmas Eve, and you have a match on Boxing Day and then 3 matches very quickly thereafter. And then you're heading into the January window. The timing, could have been a lot better, but you just work through it.
Had you had time to get a short list of coaches and get your game model in place? Because you'd only been in for such a short period of time.
Yes, it was in place.
And I was just going to spin back to the start of your career. So you first got involved in football when you founded the Tampa Bay Rowdies, is that right? But 2008, round about then?
Yes, that's right. It was a pretty volatile time or like fledgling time in U.S. soccer. You had, I think, 12 or 14 clubs in MLS at the time and another 12 or 14 in USL, the second division. And there was parity on the field between the two. So within USL, you had clubs like Montreal, Portland, Vancouver, Seattle, Minnesota, Atlanta. So some of like the big MLS clubs now. And I had played the sport. I wanted to be back in the sport and was considering different investment opportunities across football in general. And the U.S. made a lot of sense for myself. There was the opportunity to start a new club from scratch and really looked at a few different cities to do it in. Ultimately, I chose Tampa because I learned about the Rowdies' history going back to the 70s and 80s when there was the original NASL, where Pele and Beckenbauer and Eusebio played for the New York Cosmos, and you had George Best. I think he was in Fort Lauderdale. The Rowdies had Rodney Marsh, the Wegerle brothers. It was like all these guys just came to the U.S. for 10 years, and then it all kind of imploded. But the Rowdies had left a really incredible mark on that city. It was that city's, or that region, it was really Tampa Bay region, their first ever professional sports franchise. So when I found out that we could get our hands on that IP and revive a brand, we went for it. So I moved to Tampa, didn't really have any personal ties there, just moved there to launch the club from scratch.
Okay, and what was your background before that? What were you involved in doing?
So I had been in private equity and finance. Yeah, so I had played football until I was around 19. Wasn't going further in that, and focused on my studies. I was in private equity for about a year and a half, 2 years. I started a boutique merchant banking platform and was looking at different various sports deals, both on the media and club side, and ultimately first big project there was the Rowdies.
Yeah. And you enjoyed a lot of success, didn't you?
Yeah, it was a massive challenge. I mean, you're building a club literally from scratch. So I remember opening our first office, and I had hired Perry Vanderbeck, a former Rowdy, to come in as technical director to help me build out a squad. And then, I had to build and hire every position within the club. as well as build a squad overnight. So that was quite the challenge. I remember, speaking of coaching searches, went through our first head coach search, and it came down to someone with a lot of experience and someone with very little coaching experience. It was Paul Mariner. He had been assistant for Steve Nicol at New England, and Paul Dalglish, who had just retired playing at MLS in Houston. Paul ended up calling me up one day and saying, there's a new project going on at Plymouth Argyle, and that club has a special place in my heart. I'm thinking I'm gonna go there. And I said, okay, good luck, go for it. And we hired Paul Dalglish. It was his first head coaching job, so it was a really young staff. When we started this project, I was 23. I think when we kicked the first ball, I was 25, I think. And Paul was probably around 32 and had just wrapped up his playing career. And we were pretty fortunate in that as we were scouting players, we wanted to do a player combine and just bring a whole lot of players in and to compete at essentially a training camp for a few weeks. And Kenny Dalglish got us into Liverpool's academy grounds and opened the doors for us. And so it was quite an interesting experience scouting players stood next to Kenny.
And was it while you were with the Rowdies that you met Shilen Patel for the first time?
Yeah, so he's from Tampa, and we just met through mutual contacts there and became friends over the years.
Okay. And did he have any involvement in soccer or football at that time?
He did not, no. And we started to talk about his personal ambitions from a business perspective, and he's just a massive sports fan, but always looked at it from the business angle and was really intrigued by it. And so, that's kind of how the whole conversation started. And then ultimately, when I led the Bologna transaction, he participated in that, became a partner in that, and we worked on a few other transactions since then.
Yeah. Oh, okay, right. So can you tell us a bit more about that, please? So did you left the Rowdies to go to Bologna then at that time?
Well, I left the Rowdies so in our third season, we won the league championship. Going into the fourth season, to be totally honest, I was burnt out. We were thinking of selling the club. We had gone into a stable place from scratch. The league was evolving. Valuations were going up. Major League Soccer was becoming something bigger. And I figured I would just step away and we would look to exit. And we eventually sold the club to the owners of the Major League Baseball team in Tampa Bay. During my time with the Rowdies, one thing that was really interesting for me was I was asked to be on the executive committee of the team owners, and I served on the Pro Council for U.S. Soccer Federation and built really strong relationships with a lot of the other team owners and executives, many of whom now own clubs in Europe or run clubs in Europe. One of the people that I built a good relationship with is Joey Saputo, who owns the Major League Soccer team in Montreal. I thought I was actually going to take a break in 2014 for a bit, and then I learned of Bologna being in financial distress. They had just been relegated. I called up Joey, who's of Italian descent and had been looking around Italy, and we flew over, and a couple months later owned the club. And Joey still does today and doing quite well and made Champions League, and right now I think they're in fourth, hoping to get back in there for next season. So it's been an amazing story over 10 years of taking that club back to where it should be.
So were you and Shilen separate investors in Bologna at that time?
So there was an investor group led by Joey Saputo, and Shilen participates in that.
Oh, okay, right. And he got the bug for football then, did he? But through his involvement with Bologna?
I guess, yeah. I think he already was a fan. So
okay.
I think he already really enjoyed the sport.
Yeah, superb. And then how did the involvement with West Brom come about?
We had been speaking about, and when I say we, Shilen Patel, Ashish Patel, myself, we had been looking at potential club investment opportunities. not just specifically England, but more so just strategic opportunities where we can leverage our various skill sets across finance and investing, commercial, media, and sporting, to find an interesting opportunity where we feel like we could be not just capital into a club, but strategic for a club. When West Brom came up, it was not a club necessarily on our radar, but once we realized the opportunity here, then we very quickly started to do our homework.
And the fans who might not know much about Shilen, what kind of a guy is he? How involved is he with the club as well?
Super down to earth, very involved, cares very much about it. Also trusts people to do their job, so he wants the right experts in the room, whether that's your head of commercial or your head coach, which I think is super important. Sometimes the emotion gets the better of investors, and they want to be doing everything. It's good to make sure you surround yourself with the right people. So yeah, very good character, cares very much about this club and the community, and has been really focused on ensuring that there's the right people around the club to help get it to where it should be.
And was becoming a sporting director quite a departure for you, or did you find the transition quite easy based on your previous experience?
Yeah, quite easy based on previous experience. I guess I feel a bit fortunate in that I didn't take the most linear path, I guess, for your typical sporting director, career-wise. But having a mix of both sporting knowledge and finance background helps a lot, especially in the situation we found ourselves in here, where it's how do you establish a game model, philosophy, scouting, and data tools to support that, but at the same time needing to very carefully trade players to ensure that we're okay from a PSR perspective. So it's a mix of squad planning and financial planning that goes hand in hand.
Yeah. And we were talking earlier actually about the sporting director role. It does tend to vary from club to club. How would you describe your remit here?
Yeah, it varies from club to club and from individual to individual. I guess everyone has their own style. So my remit is overseeing men's first team, women's first team, academy, and then the various departments supporting those programs. So that includes football operations, scouting and recruitment, data and analytics, medical, sports science. Yeah, so it's a wide remit. A big focus of mine since last summer has been a bit of a realignment. So how do you best position each of these departments to then delegate appropriate resources to men's first team, women's first team, and academy, because those are all very different programs with different needs. And so it's a challenge, it's a fun challenge for me to instill a culture and best practices across each of those departments, and then have those experts really manage how they take those resources and consistently deploy them, but adapting them specifically for who they're servicing, whether that's men's, women's, or academy.
And I know you've got a head of football operations here as well in Ian Pearce. How do you dovetail with him? What are his responsibilities?
Yeah, so he's director of football operations now. So he oversees the head of scouting, and then he is interacting daily with men's first team head coach and women's first team head coach. And Piercy and I speak, I probably speak more to him than any other human, including my wife. So yeah, we communicate a lot. But yeah, he's very instrumental in scouting and also just on kind of daily management with the coaches.
Superb. And I think you said when you came in, you described the financial situation as perilous. I know the accounts for 23-24 were out at the end of last month, and they maybe looked a bit worrying for the fans as well. I've written down that pre-tax losses tripled, revenue halved. So what would you say to the fans about that?
Yeah, the big difference was the loss of parachute money, and then needing to adjust the cost structure. But we knew that going in, so we have a plan where we feel that we can spend appropriately on the player front, as well as there's opportunity to increase commercial revenue whilst maintaining the level of competitiveness that we need to. And we feel like we can do that over time at a sustainable level where the club isn't hemorrhaging cash, essentially. That was, we wouldn't have done this deal, frankly, if we didn't believe that was possible here. This is an interesting club in that it should be in the Prem. You feel like it belongs in the Prem. It has the infrastructure for it. But it can be in Championship and not have to solely rely on promotion to be financially sustainable. That was super important. So step number 1, be able to be in Championship and sustainable. Step number 2, be able to do that whilst being competitive. And when I say that, I qualify that as meaning being able to compete for playoffs every year, and doing that now without parachute payments. And then if you're able to go up, to have the necessary infrastructure in place already so that you can stay up. And we feel like we have that.
And what would you say to the fans about the, I suppose, short and medium term prospects of the club? What can they expect to see under you as sporting director and under the new ownership as well?
Well, one is consistency. We're not making emotional decisions. There is a plan and process in place, and we're going to trust that. That doesn't mean you don't pivot and learn, but you don't, lose your head and make rash decisions. And that goes hand in hand with scouting and player signings. There's a model we're building off of. This year has been difficult because there's a lot of turnover in the squad. And so you kind of lack consistency, and that makes it difficult for the coaches and the players. We, as I mentioned earlier, we did re-engage some of the veteran players that we feel are kind of like the spine of the team, because you never want to lose that. Then you become very vulnerable competitively, and we feel like we have a good spine in place. But now it's adding the pieces that we need, getting younger, getting players that fit the model, and also creating a cycle of value. So we have to be really smart on buying. We have to be really smart on selling. That's really key part that I think sometimes is missing with clubs. We can't be afraid to hang on to a player for too long. The only reason any club would be afraid to hang on to a player for too long is if they're afraid that they can't replace them, right? So that falls on myself to have the systems in place and always be at the ready to have those replacements, and hopefully it's always an improvement. So yeah, this year's been a process. Injuries don't help, but everyone goes through that. But I think we are, through 2 out of a 3 window transformation of this squad.
And how do you reflect on the January window? Because you lost a very good keeper in Alex Palmer to Ipswich. Which some of the fans are obviously talking about now with a couple of errors in recent games.
We knew we were going to have to make a move like that. So that was very much driven by our position in terms of profitability and sustainability. However, again, we had put a plan in place where we signed Josh Griffiths last year and Joe as well in the offseason. Josh is an academy product, but we signed him to a new long-term deal, and we got him out on loan to make sure that he was playing competitive matches and would be ready to step up if necessary or when necessary. We knew we had to make a sale, but we felt like it's difficult, of course, to move on from an established number one. It's really hard to replace that overnight, but we felt like we gave the head coach 2 very good options to do so. And Josh as an academy product, he's played meaningful time at this level and in League One, did very well first half of the season on loan. So we felt very comfortable recalling him to come into the first team. With the other moves that we made, those are very, I would say, indicative of our long-term strategy, bringing in a player like Isaac Price, Tom Urbani, and then supplementing with loans to ensure that we have the quality of player we need, and doing so within our ability to spend. So investing into young talent that we know can come and impact the first team straight away. Isaac's already done that. Tom are starting to do that, and I think we'll see more. And they're the type of players that fit the profile we're looking for. And then, with injuries to Josh Maja and others, we knew we had to bring in a striker. And so that's where you access the loan market.
And one question I meant to ask earlier on, are you based in the West Midlands now, or do you based in the States?
Yeah, I have a flat in Birmingham, but I have a home in the US as well.
Right, okay. So do you spend most of your time here during the season? Yeah. Okay, well, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Training Ground Guru podcast in association with Huddle. We'll be back next month with another episode. In the meantime, you can follow our latest updates on the website and on Twitter @ground_guru.